So I just wanted to start a little bit about who we are. So IN is a nonprofit that was established in 2014. At the time, Colorado was one of 3 states that didn't offer college opportunities for students with intellectual disability. And so we worked with the legislation to create the first schools, and we also established the nonprofit that we know today is IN. Really, our mission is to create inclusive opportunities in Colorado. We do it on a model that really looks at kind of the whole person. So academics, vocation, independence, socialization, and all the components. What do we do exactly? So our primary role is to establish and expand inclusive higher ed. So we were the organization that advocated at the start for the establishment of the first 3 schools. Since then, we've added 3 more schools. And had a whole nother round of legislation that's allowed us to continue to expand. And then we're about ready to expand to 2 more schools, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We also do a ton of education and outreach. That includes outreach to prospective families, educating them on how to prepare for college, how to plan for college, what the options are, outreach and education to educators across the state in K through 12, how to prepare your students, what the options are. It's still a new thing, and so we're still working with people to let them know, yes, college is an option, and we are here to support you through that process. And then the last thing we do is outcomes. So that's what this webinar is about. We really track the outcomes of our programs to decide, to help them see what's going well, where do we need to improve on. Like I said, they're still new, and so we're continually developing best practices. And so we're looking at our graduates and our current students and really working with our schools to make sure that we're providing the best opportunity as possible. Real quick, you've met 2 of our staff. We're a small nonprofit, so it's the 3 of us. I'm the executive director, Elise is the program coordinator, and then Shayna Lang is our community engagement manager. You probably will hear from Shayna or Elise more than me out in the community, as that's their primary role, is to be working with the community and our partners to get word out there about inclusive higher ed in Colorado. And they typically do the webinars too. So this is the only one that I do in a year. So that is that. So the agenda for tonight, I did the brief overview of IN. So now we're going to move into the brief overview of inclusive higher ed. We're going to do national outcomes. We're going to do outcomes in Colorado. And then I'm going to talk about some of the points of growth that we have. So here we go. So just a little background for those of you who are really new to or not as familiar with inclusive higher ed. Inclusive higher education is an opportunity for students with intellectual disability to attend college in a normative, very intentionally inclusive way. Programs in Colorado were all developed kind of under the same model of inclusion, and it includes these kind of key bullet points. So our hope is that if anyone goes to inclusive higher ed in Colorado, you have the same model and the same setup, so and it all works the same. So the first key point is that we've been able to create alternative admission pathways for students. So that means if there was an SAT or an ACT requirement, that's not necessarily required for our students. We really have students fill out an application, have an interview, and they're accepted based on primarily those 2 factors. They are accepted into the college. They are students, but they just have an alternate admission path. Like I said, we want these to be fully inclusive and normative. So we really ensure that our students are included in everything from dorms to clubs to course selection to classes. Any part of the campus that is available to a college student is available to our inclusive higher ed students. Students in all of the programs in Colorado take courses that align with their own career goal. So we're not dictating what you're doing. You have a career goal and you can choose that from what's available in Colorado and what college you like and what classes you want to take. And they're all working on that sort of individualized plan. The thing that makes inclusive higher ed most unique, I believe, is the access to accommodations, which most of you probably are familiar with from K through 12, extended time, note-taking, those sorts of things. We also allow our students in college to have modifications. So that's where our staff really go in and actually modify the curriculum of the course that they're taking to the students' highest capability. So the simplest example of that is, let's say it's a 10-page paper that's due for the final. We might go in and modify that to a 2-page paper or a visual demonstration of their learning. It just really is individualized to each student, but we're allowed to modify the curriculum. That being said, because we modify the curriculum, our students are non-degree bearing. They are, however, working towards a certificate credential that's been approved by the Department of Higher Ed and approved by each college and university. They earn grades, they earn credits, they earn transcripts that can be transferred to different schools, different inclusive higher ed schools in the state, but it is a certificate. It's a rigorous certificate. There's anywhere from 36 to 72 credit hours required to earn it. And so we really challenge our students academically and still maintain that same rigor, even with doing the modifications. All of our students participate in career readiness. They participate in independent living skills. There is typically one course that the students it's the only time they're not sort of in the typical courses from the course catalog. They will have a separate class that really focuses on those career development, career readiness, independent living, socializing. We do some things on dating and money management and nutrition and, kind of all of those extra components that we want to make sure we arm our students with for their futures. The last sort of big bullet here is our staff and peer support. So at each school, there's a staff of usually 3 to 4 that are responsible for the vocation and the independent living and the academic modifications. And we also rely heavily on peer supports. So we have peer mentors who work with our students in each of those arenas to provide them supports, whether it's I need someone to go to class with me, I need someone to study with me, I need someone to go to the football game with me, I want to rush a fraternity and I need some support with that, whatever the need is. We have peers that come in and trying to make it as normative as possible by having a peer alongside of you rather than, an adult like myself. That's not super normative, but really trying to help support all of our students. I talked about sort of those domains. I wanted to go through quickly. This is the model. So this is our inclusive higher ed model in Colorado, and we focus on 4, we call them pillars of support or domains. I went through the academics. Like I said, it's inclusive courses. We're doing modifications. You get a certificate, full access to the course catalog, and really high standards in academics. This is not just so glad you came and showed up, you get an A. This is really a rigorous and a college certificate. Social is the other pillar. Like I said, full campus involvement. We have peer mentors. We rely on our students who kind of develop those natural supports along the way. Students have leadership opportunities. They're in clubs. They're holding, positions in student government. Some of them have created their own clubs. There's lots of social things that go on, and we find that that's just as important as academics is developing those social skills and how to connect with your college community and hopefully for the future in your, wherever you land community. Career, that's a big one. Obviously, many people go to college to get to their career. So we're doing a ton of career planning, coaching. We are doing career readiness. That includes resumes, interviews. We look at employment while in college as sort of a progression. We kind of start with that career planning. We move into some kind of internship or work study or on-campus job. By the end, we're working into what does that permanent position look like for after college. Students are participating in both on and off-campus work experiences the whole time. The last pillar is independence. So we want to ensure our students are gaining life skills. And also that they're doing it in a way that is individualized for them. So we're developing their person-centered plan of what do we need to work on? What's your specific intent? What skills do you desire to obtain? We're teaching the students that live in the dorms, we're teaching them laundry and how to, get along with roommates. We have students who live in student apartments. So there's grocery shopping and how do I plan my budget and kind of all of those sorts of things. So really looking at those life skills that will help once they leave college. And then obviously always ensuring that we're promoting that self-advocacy piece and teaching our students how to advocate for themselves and what they need, and whether it's with a professor or their peers or their roommates or whatever it looks like. So the reason I bring up this was to give you a kind of a background, but also a lot of what we do when we're looking at the outcomes focuses on all four of these. So you'll see the outcomes set up in a way that we're evaluating each graduate on how did the academics help you, where are you socially in your community now, where are you career-wise, and where are you with independent living? And they all are, from my aspect, or from my brain, equally weighted in importance. Right now, we have these four programs. So our initial programs were Arapahoe Community College, UCCS, which is CU Colorado Springs, and then the University of Northern Colorado in Greeley. This just kind of gives you a little overview of what they are, which ones offer on-campus living. Some are 3-year programs, some are 4-year programs. One of our recent additions is Global Inclusive Program at Regis. They are a 1 to 3 year program, which is different from ACC and UCCS and UNC in that they typically do a 3 to 4 year program. But the reason they're all kind of up here, and I'm wanting to share this, is going back to in Colorado, all of our programs are CTP approved. They all have approval for a credential and a certificate, and they all really are functioning under that model that I just showed. Exciting. Last year, with the help of the legislation, we've been given funding for expansion. So we awarded funding to CSU and Metro. They will be starting up their programs this fall. Really excited about that. The CSU program is really going to start with an experiential learning and agriculture focus right now. That's kind of the need in Northern Colorado in their community. So we kind of are directing students with that sort of interest to go there. And then Metro, again, will run the same as our other programs with our pillars and open course catalog and all of the things. Fall of 2025, we have still more legislation that we can use for expansion. This time we will be specifically looking at our Western Slope, our rural communities, and our community college, really to trying to create some equity within our geographic access and reaching some of the communities that we don't reach when we have all of our programs on the Front Range. So we're really excited about that. That is an overview of inclusive higher ed and where we're at. So I'll just pause there for a minute and see if anybody has any questions about that before I launch into the outcomes piece.
This is Katie. I live in Grand Junction area. CMU. Are you guys, is CMU in the running for getting a program?
Yeah, so how it works is we've opened up a grant program that anyone can apply to, but we've done intentional outreach to schools. So yes, we've outreached to CMU, Fort Lewis, Western, Pikes Peak Community College, Northeastern Junior College. There's a community college in Lamar. I think I'm missing some, but we've really done our due diligence to try to reach out and inform. So yes, we've been having conversations with CMU, but it is a competitive grant process. So they have to apply, they have to fill out the grant program, and then my organization and a team, along with the Department of Higher Ed, evaluate those grant applications and award the funding. So that's due April 15th, and we'll make announcements by the end of May of where the next 2 schools are. So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But yes, we know that the Western Slope could use some services for sure.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, onward. So I'm going to head into the national outcomes. So I want to just kind of give an overview. So like I said, Colorado was one of 3 states that didn't have inclusive higher ed in 2015. About 10 years before that is when this movement started, and it started in other places in the nation. So this map kind of gives you an idea of right now, well, as of February, so last month. I don't think anything super large has changed since then, but there's about 320 or 332, sorry, that number's right on there, programs across our nation that offer inclusive higher ed. 49 out of 50 states offer it. And this is overseen by a group called Think College. And Think College is our national coordinating center that kind of oversees, provides resources, helps programs establish, get off the ground, and provides ongoing development and national and work in DC and all of the things that we need a national coordinating center to do. We used their data. So they have some outcome data. And what we wanted to do is create a baseline for us to see, are we doing well? Are we not? Where are we faltering? What's kind of happening on a national level? So the report that we're using is a survey that they did. They did it with what's called their current TIPSID programs. I'm throwing a lot of acronyms, but TIPSID stands for Transition and Post-Secondary Program for Students with Intellectual Disability. Basically, they have 36 colleges that they consider TIPSID programs, which just means they're getting TIPSID funding, which is federal funding. So they're monitoring these 36 programs in this cohort of TIPSIDs. And one of the things they've done is release kind of a report of how they're doing with outcomes. They surveyed their existing students and the graduates from those 36 programs. So there were 168 graduates that they surveyed. And so we've kind of used our data against their data to say, are we good? Are we not good? Where are we at? They had a 46% response rate. And, oh, sorry, my screen just went. The difference that they had is that their graduate data was collected 1 year post-graduation. So our data, we've been collecting it since 2020. So we have students who are responding to our data that are 3 years out. This particular survey only looked at that one point in time and 1 year post-graduation. So just keep that in mind, as this is sort of apples to apples, but a little apple orangish with the timelines from when people graduated, because a lot changes from year 1 to year 2 to year 3. So that is where our data comes from. So I'm just going to go through kind of the national data, and then I'll get into Colorado. And again, this is going to go along with those 4 pillars that I talked about. One of the things, the first one that we're going to look at is career. So when we say career and employment, we are looking for competitive, integrated, and meaningful. And what I mean by competitive is that students are making at or above minimum wage. What I mean by integrated is that they are in an inclusive work setting. So they are not working in, back in the day, people used to work in sheltered workshops, those types of things. These are real jobs in inclusive settings. And then the last one, meaningful, is that they are getting choice. They are getting to work wherever they want in a career of their choice. Studies and documents have shown that we know nationally when someone has higher education with an intellectual disability, their wages are increasing over 102%. That's huge. We also know that because of the skills and career paths developed out of college, our individuals with intellectual disability are having job diversity now. So historically, there's been a lot of individuals who've worked food prep, cleaning and maintenance, those types of things. What this is offering people is new paths and new career choices. And one of the most astonishing ones to me is that there's been a 300% increase in healthcare professions for individuals with intellectual disability, which is huge. There's a need in healthcare, and people are able to meet that need. In the data outcomes for Think College and their programs, 1 year after graduation, they had a 73% employment rate of their graduates. We're going to compare that. This number is a little different in different places, but they use a 15% employment rate. I've seen 19, I've seen 22. Regardless, it's a low employment rate on average for individuals with intellectual disability. So going from 15 to 73% is enormous and kind of makes your jaw drop. So really proud of that. In academics, so all of the programs nationwide are not the same as they are in Colorado. We really try to, or we insist that our students all are taking all-inclusive courses except for maybe one. But nationwide, 94% of students in inclusive higher ed have participated in at least one inclusive class, and 74% had at least half of their courses inclusive. So while they're not demanding the same sort of level of inclusion in the courses that Colorado schools are, they're still high, and they're still providing these normative inclusive paths. Nationwide, 77% of the graduates earned certificates, and 38% pursued further education after graduating. Huge, that's amazing. And then the last one is 71% of programs offered a credential approved by their college. So again, I include that because in Colorado, all of our schools and all of our students earn a certificate. So the number you'll see later is much higher. Nationwide, not all of the programs offer an approved credential like we do. Some of them just offer audit courses and things along those lines. So just trying to give you guys all a baseline of where people are at nationally and as compared to Colorado. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, well, I'm going to skip that. Hold on, I'm going to get to that later. I'm going to come back to that. So the next pillar that we have is really in that social outcomes piece. So part of developing these programs is to really ensure that all of our students have access to everything on college campus, and that a lot of the times is all of the social activities. So proud to say nationwide, 100% of the programs in this study offered full access to students to join clubs and organizations. And I believe that there's a direct link for joining your community in college to joining your community after college. And so nationwide, 92% of the graduates are reporting satisfaction in their social life post-graduation. And I think that's amazing. I think this is an underlooked outcome of college, right? I think people tend to look at career, they tend to look at the academics and the certificate, but I think that having your social connection to community really is a huge component to your overall life satisfaction. So I'm really proud that this is such a high number and a component of what we do. And then lastly, on the national outcomes is residential. So nationally, 23% of the colleges in this study offered on-campus housing, and 84% of it was inclusive housing. You may be saying, like, what do you mean inclusive housing? And that just means that the housing they offered is available to all the college students, whether they're in inclusive higher ed or not. So a really high percentage offer living in dorms or student apartments, living alongside their typical peers. Not all of the colleges provide on-campus housing. Similar in Colorado, not all of ours do. Our community colleges don't, and Metro doesn't plan to off the bat, but our other three colleges and universities do. So we're a little ahead of the curve in how many offer it, but all of the ones in Colorado that offer it are 100% inclusive. So based on this study, 60% of the students lived in university housing. Others live with family or in non-college housing outside of that. Nationwide, after graduation, which is really what we're talking about, there's 14% of graduates at the year one mark that lived independently after graduating college. I will say that number, I would guess, is super low. And the reason I say that is because I found that with our graduates, they're living independently more like year two or year three after graduation. It's not something that they, get home and bam, move out into their own apartment. So our number in Colorado is much higher than that, but I am taking into effect that the national outcomes look at just that 1 year mark after graduation, but still a huge success with improving independent living for students to continue on their independence from living in the dorms or apartments and continuing on. So that was just a really quick run through of the national outcomes, just to give you guys kind of a baseline as we dive much deeper into the Colorado outcomes. Is there any questions on the national numbers?
There is a question in the chat, Tracy.
Yes.
And the question is, there are statistics that neurodiverse college grads have an 80% unemployment rate. Can you please speak to the discrepancy with the stats you provided?
Ooh. So this is just looking at our students from IHE programs. So that number typically weighs typical college graduates as well as our inclusive higher ed graduates. Our inclusive higher ed numbers as compared to typical college students is much, much lower. So I'm only talking about students who've attended inclusive higher ed, which is specifically for students with intellectual disabilities. I'm not talking about students with disabilities or intellectual disabilities that have gone on to a credit or a degree bearing program. Yes, there is discrepancy there. And yes, I think that a lot of our students get tremendous amounts of support as far as while they're in college, vocational support. We're connecting them to jobs, we're connecting them afterwards. And so it's a much easier path for them. They have more support pushing behind them, whereas a student who isn't enrolled in an inclusive higher ed program but may need those levels of support is not getting it. I will tell you that we have a student, Casey, she's a great example. So she started college before inclusive higher ed was a thing in Colorado. She has autism. She went to a community college and failed miserably. She could do the schoolwork, but she wasn't successful in sort of the executive functioning required, the socialization required, all of those kind of other components. So she failed. So she dropped out. Then inclusive higher ed came and she decided to give it a go. And so she went to Arapahoe Community College in the Elevate program, succeeded brilliantly. Completed her certificate there. And then she actually went on to CSU to actually earn her bachelor's degree after that and was successful on her second go around of going to college after she had gotten the supports that she needed. So I don't know if this is helping answer, but keep in mind, I'm talking about a small subset and those big numbers are the general population itself, those with disabilities and intellectual disabilities going to typical programs. Answer, yes, no?
Yes, you answered the question perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, good. I don't want to leave people hanging. Okay.
And I love the fact that you highlighted the difference it makes with the correct supports
Yeah.
that people need.
Yep.
And this is the underlying issue in every aspect of a person's life.
Absolutely. It's finding exactly what supports any individual needs and making it happen. So, okay. So let's talk about Colorado. That's where we're all from. So my organization is the one who does this data collection. So we look at it from a statewide view. So when I'm talking numbers coming up here next, I'm talking about all of our schools together. I do have individual data for each school, but when we report out, we look at statewide, what are we doing? Because I want us to be a collaborative unit who is creating inclusive higher ed across the state. So we had 44 graduates during our survey, which is a very small number, but our first year we had 5. So this feels like an enormous amount. And this year we'll be adding 20 more onto that. So from here, I think the numbers will really start to increase and we'll start to get some really statistical relevance, but we're taking the 44 and going with it. We had a 43% response rate, which nationally they had a 46% response rate. So I feel like we're pretty in line, although I want 100% response rate, but I'm not going to get that. And I know that. We did it as anonymous surveys. So people filled out, they had surveys where they selected their level of satisfaction, as well as there was space for people to write in comments or feedback about whatever the topic was. And again, that survey focused on the 4 pillars. This just gives you an idea of who answered our survey. We collected some demographics. Age is pretty what you would expect. 42% identified as living with Down syndrome or autism. We're pretty evenly split on male and female. You will notice on the graduation year, because we surveyed them all together, the 2022 number is much higher. That is directly an influence of COVID. We had a much larger graduating class that year because the year before we had people hold off on graduation or stop going for a year. So we had an influx that year of people who came back and graduated after COVID was kind of over. So I put this quote on there as someone wrote this on our survey response that says, I feel like I'm blazing a path for other people with intellectual disabilities who want to pursue higher education. And they are. I say that in that, yes, this person is one of the first 44 graduates in the state of Colorado, but also it's one of the people who's helping us influence what programming looks like, how we expand, what we need to put in place. And so not only are they trailblazing and showing people that it can be done, but they're helping us trailblaze these programs for everyone else. So I just thought that was it's one of my favorite things that was written in the survey collection. So 89.5% of people indicated overall satisfaction with their college education. And so while that was great, I was like, well, what does that mean? Right? Like, it's just so generic. And so this kind of led me to look at there's so much more to college than just employment and getting your certificate. There's an overall college education and college experience that I think is really hard to measure sometimes and quantify, but I know it's there because of the feedback and the answers we've gotten. So I can direct you to that graphic on the right. We know that people with IDD are 3 times more likely to be employed with college, but also they're getting an opportunity for lifelong learning. They're getting an opportunity to engage in their community, and they're getting an opportunity to have a more fulfilling future because of all of the components that they have experienced and learned while they're in college. We know that the power of inclusion in itself influence satisfaction. So we're talking about the intentional ways that we make sure our students are included. So we're talking they're in typical classrooms, like I've said, they are alongside typical peers, they're living alongside, eating, dining, going to all the clubs, all of the things. It's really authentic inclusion. I love to tell the story of a student who rushed a fraternity at UNC. And not only was it so good for our student to be a part of that, but the fraternity brothers there welcomed him with open arms. I mean, just one of the fraternity brothers. And so it's really like an intentional inclusion that's making not only our students feel included, but the other students, the quote unquote typical peers, they're becoming more accepting and more understanding of a population they may not have had access to. That satisfaction with college, I think, comes from that academic challenge I talked about. Like I said, we give individual choice. You can take whatever classes you want, and we're going to push you. Homework is hard. That's what we hear in a lot of our surveys. Oh, homework is so hard, so much work. And it should be, it's college. And so, but we're showing you that we can challenge you, and you are so much more capable than anyone ever really probably gave you credit for. I think that satisfaction comes from the clear increase in self-confidence and determination and advocacy that we've seen, that value add to the community and your self-engagement into the community, and then all of the development of skills that helped you obtain and maintain jobs and independence. And so I wanted, before we get into the actual numbers of things that are quantifiable, I think it's really important to look at, we have almost 90% satisfaction with college. And I think this is a big component of what makes that up. It's those holistic outcomes that can't necessarily measure, but they're certainly there from the feedback and the comments we got in our surveys. So, because I don't like our students and our folks to be numbers, we have this list of actual students. So these are their actual names and kind of some of the things they've done. So we've had paraeducators, graphic designers, CNA, nutrition, self-advocates, athletic departments. We have quite a few who've become ambassadors for us and advocates. They helped with passing our legislation and testifying to the legislators about their experience and how we could expand it. We also have many who are now living independently. I put Brianna and Michael on there just because they're the most recent, but there's tons who have currently live in their own apartment. And then there's other things that occur, right? We have Isabel, who's been in a long-term relationship since college. So she met her boyfriend there, and they've stayed together and are experiencing kind of that relationship part of life that's so exciting. And she also she went and advocated for inclusion in Uganda after college. So I mean, our graduates are doing big things, but just so we don't get caught in that there's 73% employment rate, they're actual people with actual jobs. So I just like to point that out. All right, let's get into our numbers. So similar to how I did the national, I'm just going to go through all 4. This is Colorado's academic outcomes. 89% satisfaction with the education. 95% felt that the IHE, that's the Inclusive Higher Ed program, I'm going to use that acronym throughout now, helped them achieve their academic goals. 100% of students participated in inclusive classes, and 100% earned a certificate, and 22% are or plan to pursue further education. So that really, those last 2 kind of beat the national totals. We're a little lower in those who are pursuing national or further education, as it was 38% nationally. But I think that we are right in line with where we need to be in Colorado as far as academics. Some of the things that people commented on about why they felt so satisfied in academics were that they felt privileged to go to college. They had a diversity of class choice. They earned a real credential. They got to explore their educational interests. They were supported. They got to choose classes in their field of study. All of those things really added to that satisfaction. Common fields of study we saw in Colorado are business, communications, entrepreneur, technology, arts, human services, education, sports. The list goes on, and those are some of our more common of our grads. Oh, I think that's all I have on academics. Looking at my notes. Okay, so our next pillar is those career outcomes. So proud to say 84% of our grads are currently employed. That's a little higher than the national average of 73%. Again, they're only at their year one mark, and we're at years 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we have a little bit more time under our belts, but 84% is a pretty astonishing number. Most of our students are working part-time. I will say in the survey that 37% of them did express working more hours. So that's something for us to pay attention to. Average pay of our graduating students is anywhere from $17 to $20. Some are making more. Everyone is certainly making above minimum wage. 84% are also satisfied with their current employment situation. And then 88% felt that the inclusive higher ed program prepared them for their current job. And one of the biggest ways I think that was done is in that second stat of the 79% who had internships while on campus. So we have tons of students in internships, just, doing work study, rec center, library, student life office, sports, but then often and always we try to get our students into internships that are in their area of study. And so we work hard to develop connections either on the campus or off the campus with ways that our students can gain skills in their area of study. I will say that I'm making this sound all flowery, but there certainly are some areas of growth in each of these areas. There were some students, obviously, who expressed dissatisfaction. Most of the dissatisfaction was expressed for they had a hard time finding a job, they have a hard time finding support, and they want more hours and they want better pay. So that last one, I think many of us can relate to. But I do think that that's an area for us to look at to make sure that we're arming our students with the ability to continue to advocate for support, advocate for more hours, ways to get support in finding jobs and those sorts of things. Social outcomes. So this is the one area where we're much lower than the national outcomes, and that's certainly something we're looking at. So 63% of our grads reported satisfaction in their social life, as compared to nationally, there's 92%. 74% are keeping in touch with their college friends. 90% feel like their inclusive higher ed program prepared them to be socially engaged, but there certainly is a disconnect to feeling prepared and actually doing it at this point. One of the things that keep coming up that we've looked at is the vast majority of the social connections are happening virtually. And that's quite a shift from being in college, living in the dorms, having your whole social life there, and then leaving there and having the friends that you made be virtual and be far away. So a lot of students have reported a lack of friends nearby. They are less socialization than they had in college. And really feel like there's a little less structure in their social department. So this is one of the areas that we, as my organization and as a state, are really going to dive into of what can we do here and what's going on. I will say that still 63%, which is the majority, are satisfied with their social life. And this isn't on here, but many of them feel more socially engaged and more socially connected than they did before college. And that's certainly been a growth area for them, but it's certainly a growth area for us in Colorado still. And the last pillar is our residential. So, like I said, 3 of the 4 colleges that are currently running offer on-campus housing. About 50% of the students who attend inclusive higher ed are utilizing that option. So no one at ACC is. UCCS is a commuter college, so about half their students live on campus and half don't. And then everyone at UNC lives on campus. So that just kind of gives people an idea of where we're coming from, of who lived independently. Right now, of our respondents, we had 42% that live independently. I mentioned when we were looking at the national outcomes, there was a 14%, and we have 42%. Again, I think it's, well, I will say because we're amazing. No, I'm kidding. I think it's because years 2 and 3 are also on here, and I think it takes our students just a little more time to kind of get back out there, find their apartment, and really kind of get that living situation in place after college. That leaves 58% who are primarily living with family members. 89% of those are satisfied with their current living situation. And I want to point that out because I feel like often we look at residential outcomes and independent living outcomes as, well, if they're not living independently in their own apartment, it's somehow been a failure. And that's not the case. Many of our graduates don't really intend on living in their own apartment, and they're more than happy to live with their families, and that's kind of their family plan. And they're satisfied with it. So while I'm really proud of the 42% who are living independently, and am certain that the college experience we've given them and the college skills we've given them have led to their success in that, that is in no way taking away from the skills that the 58% who live at home have gained as far as, participating in their independent living, even from their family's home. And then 79% feel that they were prepared for their current living situation by their inclusive higher ed partner. One of the things that in this particular section is I included some of the comments in this presentation to share with you all, because I think it's, like I said, it's more about living independently. It's those living skills. And so a lot of our students reported that they really developed those skills: budgeting, cooking, transportation, laundry. They really, through their inclusive higher ed program, got the needed support to learn how to do that and to learn what it was like to not have mom and dad with them every second of the day. They learned accountability. They learned how to access support where they needed it. There was some feedback in those 10% that are a little unsatisfied, that said they wish they lived independently. They haven't been able to afford it yet. And they also asked for more money management and budgeting guidance, and additional support around that. So again, those are things that we take from these surveys, and we go back to our schools and say, how can we continue to improve upon this moving forward? And that is kind of our outcomes. I wanted to, before I end here and open it up for questions, just do 2 quick things. That webinar panel I talked about, our graduate panel, is April 18th. We get a group of our actual graduates together, and you get to talk to them and hear about their experience from their mouths. So they're not going to talk about employment rates and independent living rates, but they're going to tell you all about what their plans are and what they gained from college. And it's one of my favorite webinars of the year. So I would recommend you sign up for that. And then, because I don't have a student voice here, I always think it's great to have one. So I'm just going to play this quick minute video. It's 1 minute long, if you're okay with that, just to kind of show you from one of our graduates, from her voice, of what her graduation feels like.
My name is Gabby. The school that I go to is Arapahoe Community College, and my absolute favorite part about college is having the experience to meet new people and starting up your own club. The opportunity that it meant for me is that I could get a higher education and not just go into a day program. It has given the opportunity for me to better myself and learn how to get good skills to get a better career than sitting at home. I've learned I need to give myself grace when things get very stressful. I've also learned that I'm a very social person and need to be around people. So my advice is to just jump into the unknown and go for it. Always ask for help when you don't understand something. Speaking up for yourself is a big key that I had learned. In high school, I wouldn't really speak up for myself, make mistakes, learn from them. College has been a wonderful experience, and it gives you more self-growth. I've learned more as a person about what it is to be more independent and have fun.
So that is one of our graduates this year.
My name is
Oh,
Gabby.
and it's
The
playing
school that I
again.
go
No,
to is
don't
a
do
rap.
that. She's one of our graduates. We'll have a whole panel of graduates from each of our schools so you can hear their voices at our next one. Those are the Colorado outcomes. You have like 10 minutes left. I have a couple more slides with just resources on them, but I'd love to take time and hear any questions you have or a discussion. Yeah, go. Marcella, go ahead. You don't have to raise your hand, just blurt it out.
Hi. So the one thing that I always am thinking about is, first of all, great information. Love the college grads speaking for themselves, and I'm actually going to use part of it in my talk tomorrow at IDD Day at the Capitol. So,
Excellent.
but my biggest question that comes to mind is people keep asking me, like, how do benefits play into all this? What are consequences? How does that all work? I have no idea.
Yeah, so one, we have a benefits webinar that I think Elise can send out where we have an expert. I'm not an expert in benefits, but I do know that we really work with our students to understand that in my head, earning a paycheck plus your benefits always equates to more than just your benefits. And so even if your benefits go down as your paycheck goes up, you're still netting more. And so we really work with families to understand that. There's different rules and regulations about it while students are in college that I don't feel confident enough to speak to because it's not my area of expertise, but it's talked about in our webinar. And then outside of the benefits piece, we really work with our state agencies with vocational rehabilitation and our Medicaid waivers and those things to really try to ensure our students receive supports while they're in college and after college, utilizing those benefits as well. Did that help? Not very much, but
No,
I like to stay in my lane, not speak about things I'm not an expert.
yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if other people have had similar situations, just trying to get an appointment with a benefits counselor is just like everything else. There's a wait list unless I don't know about certain things available that don't have a wait list.
We can actually, I'm happy to connect you to actually I have one benefits counselor who I always refer people to. So when we send the follow-up information after this, I'll make sure that Elise includes his information on there to send to you. He's excellent.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Are there questions? Oh, questions in the chat? Let me see. Oh. No questions, just nice things. Thank you so much. Okay, are there any more questions?
I have a question about cost.
Yeah.
How do people pay for this?
So it's college, so there's tuition and there's room and board, just like a typical college student has. All of our students, all of our schools I mentioned at the beginning are what's called CTP. So that makes students eligible for FAFSA and financial aid. So they can get Pell Grants, they can do work studies, all the different sort of grants and scholarships. They don't qualify for student loans because it is a certificate program. But eligible for financial aid. We also, like I said, connect with our vocational rehabilitation counselors and the community center boards and Medicaid waivers and really try to utilize some of those benefits to help pay. There also are a ton of scholarships. My organization offers some, the CCBs offer some, there's a bunch of scholarships out there. And so it's really just like you would any other college student. Sort of, my daughter's a freshman at Montana State and we've been piecemealing it together as best we can. So it is not something that is paid for like the K through 12 system, but certainly is ways to afford it, I guess.
And I will add to that just
Yeah.
kind of as a follow-up. So Tracy previously mentioned the webinar that included information from the Colorado Office of Employment First. So that's our benefits counseling webinar. That was actually the same webinar where we talked about how to pay for college and finances. And so she talked a lot about how can students kind of help contribute with their work study and all that kind of stuff as well. That's the same webinar. So I will already be sending out that link. And then along with that, we have a 1-page PDF handout. We try not to make it too lengthy because people can kind of get bogged down in a variety of sources. So I call it like our financial cheat sheet, and I'll include that as well. And then if anybody has any follow-up questions specifically on that topic, feel free to reach out and we can schedule a one-on-one meeting about that.
Thanks, Elise.
Thank you.
Okay.
I do have another question.
Okay, great.
So, well, one, I think, Elise was going to say something mentioned about IDD Day at the Capitol tomorrow. Having said that, I'm wondering if part of this program or an affiliated program has any kind of training, regarding, speaking up at the legislative level for bills that affect people with IDD or any disability really, for living a full life the way they see fit for themselves. As we know, there's plenty of barriers and gaps. And one of the reasons why there's IDD Day at the Capitol. So I'm just wondering if there's anything that's included with this program.
So not specifically around that. We've been a part of IDD Day many times. In fact, I went last year. I'm not going this year. But we obviously have advocated for the passage of the bills that have put these in place. And we've really advocated on IDD Day and other times. So we've worked with a lot of our graduates who helped us advocate and helped speak with legislation and testify. And we had one of our students the year that our bill was passing come and speak on IDD Day to all of the legislators. So we do some of that, but I do know that the ARC of Colorado has a lot of training programs for people who are interested in doing that, that we can refer people to for specific training. We really talk about self-advocacy, and so some of that would lend naturally to being able to speak about your experience, and we give them a voice in our webinars and being our ambassadors and speaking nationally at Think College and those sorts of things. And so I think that our role is to kind of give that voice, and then it can be translated to different arenas where necessary, but not specific legislative training. Okay. Well, real quick, I promised that, well, maybe, there we go. Real quick, I've kind of gone over some of this, but we continue to grow. And so as we do this, our survey showed some weaknesses and some successes, and that's what you'd expect to see. So we will continue to grow in our evaluation and in our programs. One of the big things that we're going to be working on next is understanding the goals starting our freshman year, and have those goals been achieved, and were our students prepared for those goals? I talk about that a lot in the independent living piece. Is it your goal to live independently in an apartment? Or maybe it's not. Maybe you just have a goal of having those skills. So that's an example of us really understanding that more. We going forward will, do things like wait at least one full year to survey the graduates. It's not fair to survey graduates 2 months after they've graduated college. Nobody is ready to have any sort of outcome. You're hopefully off traveling and resting and enjoying life for a few months before you do that. So things like that. And then really kind of looking at it as a progression rather than combining all of the graduates together of like what happens in year 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, and on down the line. So just so you all know, I just like to point out that we are continuing to grow and continuing to enhance these offerings and the evaluations we do. At the end of the presentation, these are some links to some of our different programs, our webinars, our info sessions we do for educators, our mentorship opportunities. We have college prep resources, all kinds of things. My organization is a nonprofit, so if you ever want to get involved or learn more about how to do that, reach out to me. We've got a board of directors that's always looking for volunteers and ways to get involved if that's something that interests you outside of just gathering this information. And then the final slide is just the national resources from Think College, where you can see the programs nationally. You can have lots of family resources. And I think it's Virginia that did this Going to College preparation website, which is a really nice college prep for educators and families who are thinking about college and how to prep for it. And that's that.